Hey, I'm Jeremiah Merced, a youth reporter. I'm here with Khalees, the co-author of the book Sir Morien, The Legend of the Knight of the Round Table. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
What led towards the collaboration between you and Holly Black, and what is your relationship with her like?
Yeah, Holly and I have been friends for years. She writes a lot more often and regularly than I do. We started working on this book in, I think, 2017.
Wow.
Yeah, the pandemic kind of took a lot of time out of this process, but I don't think either of us really understood, because Holly does YA novels, and again, like I do poetry. It's not hard to get my work out, but we didn't quite understand how much longer the process takes, like getting an illustrator, like having them attached to the project, how long it takes for like their art to become a part of it. Like after all of the stuff that we had done, we were done with our part of the script in 2018. But it wasn't until like basically last year that the whole book like got finalized.
Wow, that's a really long process.
Yes,
it's crazy
it is.
when you said 2017. Damn, I was only like, can't even think about how old I was. It was so long ago. But wow.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, we initially started writing this book for her son, who was, I think, like 4 or 5 and just turned 10. So like, yeah, it's, well, clearly younger than that, and like just turned 10 this year. So yeah, it's been a long process.
There's a lot of stories about the White Knights in King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table lore. How did you feel about writing the only black knight in his court and making the narrative a children's story?
Well, I think it's really important to, especially for the way that people think about medieval times, to try and broaden that for people. It's so Eurocentric. Like people forget that like literally the rest of the world was happening at the same time with, in a lot of cases, like civilizations that were way more advanced than Europe. But like trade routes existed. Like people from like middle Europe, like France, England, were trading with folks from Northern Africa, from Southern Africa, from like all over Asia. It's important to remember that that's true. So when we encountered this romance, we were like, oh, wait, there's a Black Knight of the Round Table and it's canon? Okay, cool. There's paintings of Sir Morien. There's like other fanfic of Sir Morien, but this is the one that's based off of the actual romance, I think discovered in the 14th century initially. But yeah, and he's the only one. He's the only black member of the Round Table, which has so many knights, like just a pile of them. But finding that one needle, we thought, was really worth like sharing.
I found it curious how there was like only one black knight, because we were doing our research about it, and it was like when we came across it, it was like, damn, like most of the knights were white, so to see one black knight, that was like, oh yeah, this is interesting to me. And it's different.
But then you see like there's other points like in history where this happens. Like you see like the story of Yasuke, who was like the one samurai who's part of Nobunaga's set of knights, and that's real too. Like it's interesting and important to see where those intersections happen, even if it's just the one person who got documented. That one person being documented, even though, you know, Arthurian tales are mostly fiction, not actual history. But when you find that one connection point, it's important to spread it around and make people understand that, like, no, we were here. We were also here. People knew about, like, it wasn't like Africa was being discovered. Like they'd always been involved in these things too.
And to add up as a following question, I wanted to ask you, knowing this is a retelling of the tale of Sir Morien, what was the process in doing this research? Because I would assume that there's a lot of research that would go into this topic.
Well, Holly Black and I both have a pretty good base understanding of like the basic knights and the basic timeline of Arthur. You know, like he's born of Mab, like roams around the Welsh countryside, has some mishaps, shall we say, and forms the Round Table after taking control of Wales. but for this particular one, especially like with Morien's connection to Northern Africa, we wanted a lot of the illustrations to reflect more of that than the European side, because even when you see paintings of Sir Morien, like he's got a European set, you'll see him in a European set of armor, but then you'll also see him in Moorish garb. So we wanted to make sure that there were some elements of both medieval, Middle Eastern history and costuming in it, as well as European. And then just digging into this rather short romance itself was interesting, to say the least. We cut a lot out. Like, we had to simplify, like, just like super concentrate this story to make it more palatable palatable is a terrible word, but just easier to digest for the age of kids that we were looking at. So there was a lot of editing and a lot of reframing, but it still kind of hits the main points of what happens in that original story of Sir Morien.
So I know you mentioned you cut some things out.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give us an insight on like what things you would have cut out in the story?
So in classic Arthurian fashion, like there's like side quests all over in Sir Morien. Like when Morien meets Gawain and Lancelot, and they decide to travel together, both Gawain and Lancelot get distracted by other things and like run off and leave Morien in this seaside town. So, like, to do his own research, basically. And like there's a couple of pages of that, and the whole things that they get up to as well. Like there's Gawain accidentally kills like a knight from this keep, but ends up sleeping at the keep, and he ends up in jail. Like Lancelot's off fighting beasts in the woods, and in the meantime, Sir Morien's still looking for his dad in what on the paper is like an actual racist town where like the people will not talk to him because he has the mark of Cain. Like, it's not until he joins back up with the knights that they actually give him information. It's a whole like interesting scene that they're like, hey, he's wandering through town looking for information, and people are literally slamming doors in his face. We decided maybe not to add that part because there wasn't enough time to get into it. But it's interesting the different things that they got up to in basically all of that side questing that they had to do. One of the cool things when we first started this, sorry if I'm rambling,
No.
Holly, who's wonderful at this, wrote a really quick, like, page and a half paraphrased version of the whole thing in her style, in a very YA style, and it is perhaps one of my favorite things that I've read in like the past like decade. It's so short and so quippy and like spot on for all the things that actually happen. It's wonderful.
Thank you for sharing all that. That was a lot to take in.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. But I get to at least get some background on, how this book, came apart and some of the things that were not included in the finished copy. While reading this story, it stood out to me that Sir Morien envied and fought with Sir Lancelot, but Sir Gawain tried to mediate peace in the group. Why do you think it's important to show kids how to work as a team?
Because, I mean, you're going to have to work with other folks your entire life, pretty much. Even being out in the wilds, like doing things like mostly on your own, there's no point where you're only going to have to work with yourself forever. You will have to learn to work with other people at some point. So let's get that in early, shall we? Yeah, just like learn to work together through your differences as much as you can.
Well, before, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to ask, what would you give, people my age and people of around the building, what advice would you give us?
Oh my gosh. Did I not just say it? It was like work together. No, do I have advice? I don't know. I think I'm still learning a lot from from the world around, because like I often feel like I kind of don't know what I'm doing. I think my biggest piece of advice is ask questions. Just keep asking questions, because even if people don't have answers for you, finding answers that work for you is probably going to be better than you just floundering in the dark.
Thank you for sharing that with me.
Sure.
I think that hearing that and people being able to hear what you have to say is really important. Clee Smith is the author of Sir Morien, Legend of the Knight of the Round Table. Clee, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an honor.
No problem, Jeremiah. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. This is a production at the NEPM Media Lab. We did it. Oh my goodness, we got it done.